I want to welcome everybody to the webinar today and appreciate everybody taking the time to join us. The first thank yous I'd like to give is for the City of Cupertino and the Cupertino Chamber of Commerce, the Small Business Development Center, the Small Business Majority Group, and the NorCal SBDC for helping put all this stuff together. You know, one of the messages we really want to get out in these webinars is that there are a lot of people putting out a lot of information out there, and it's really important, especially for small business owners, that you get the correct information from the correct resources. And that's why understanding how these partnerships work, and that's why I couldn't be more thankful that the City of Cupertino has offered to host this. It is being live streamed on the TV channel. There's going to be a YouTube that you can watch and refer to some of the information we're sharing today. And then once again, having our panelists, and I'll get into the intros with them today and we'll go ahead and get started. But I just feel that it is really important that everybody understands that the partnership between the city, the chamber, the Small Business Development Center, and some of these other key groups are really key for you being able to get your business back up and running and for you to be successful. You know, these have been very hard times, and I hope that everybody is safe and healthy. And as we start to look forward to reopening for business, understanding the landscape that has even changed dramatically from last week to today, and then figuring out a plan forward is really key. And that's why I couldn't be more happy to be joined today by Scott Rogalski, who is a finance guy with the NorCal Small Business Development Center and has really had his finger on the pulse of a lot of these loans for a long time, long before EIDL came out and PPP. He's been helping groups like the Small Business Development Center here in Silicon Valley to figure out who the local partners are and how to get funding through the Small Business Administration for our local businesses. We also have Bianca Blomquist, who is with the Small Business Majority, and her group is just a huge business advocate and has a ton of information to share. And then finally, and last but not least, is Louise Dawson, who's no stranger to Cupertino. She's done many programs for us in the past for our restaurants, but is rejoining us today in her new role, at least new for us. She's been doing it for a while with the NorCal Small Business Development Center, primarily focusing on restaurants. As you know, restaurants are most vulnerable, and we're going to need to give them as much help and resources as we can to move forward. So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Scott and have him give you an update on some of the stuff that's changed over the last few weeks, in addition to just the last few days. Welcome, Scott.
Oh, good morning. Yeah, thank you very much, Kevin. Thank you for putting this together. Thank you for the City of Cupertino, and thank you for the other experts on the line, Louise Dawson, part of the SBDC team, and then Bianca Blanco from Small Business Majority. Real quick, Kevin, how many minutes would you like me to talk about an update? What are you thinking?
How about 15 okay. minutes is good. And like I said, I'm sure we'll get to a lot of stuff in Q&A, but if you need more than that, I know that the landscape has changed. So really what you feel is going to be appropriate information that's needed.
Okay, so yeah, I'll show a slideshow and I'll go through it about 10-15 minutes. So thank you very much again for the time. My name is Scott Rogalski. I'm part of the Northern California SBDC network. We cover the most 38 northern counties in the state of California. We are funded by SBA, Small Business Administration. So we're federally funded. We're also state funded by the Governor's Office of Economic Development called GoBiz. And because we're funded by the feds and the state, we come to the business owners and the community at no cost. So we can work with you and help you through this hard time to apply and get this funding for disaster. We also have our restaurant program manager on the phone. Her name is Louise Dawson. She's actually sitting in a restaurant right now. She's that awesome. And she is an expert in that field and has an amazing team behind her. I'm part of the Finance Center. We're both running two separate programs under Northern California SBDC, and we specialize in helping businesses get loans. And today we help specialize them get loans only for disaster currently. So Kevin and Bianca, we were talking before we got on the call today, and things are changing all the time, even like 10 minutes ago. But this information was correct when we put it together, but things are changing all the time. Please don't hesitate to apply for the EIDL or the Triple P when it comes available again. Don't hesitate. Please don't hesitate. Don't disqualify yourself before you actually apply, because you don't know. only people that know if you're approved or not approved is if you can apply. So always, if you have investors or partners that are part of your business, please check with them before applying, because they may or may not want you to apply. We do not have access to the status of your submitted SBA loans, but we can help you get to the right person to help you find that out. And then anybody that was in the queue before SBA shut off their economic injury disaster loan product or web portal, your loans will be processed. They will be processed. You just need to be a little bit patient. So the $380 billion of new funding coming, this is the breakdown of it. Then there's extra breakdowns within that. And a lot of this is obviously a very condensed slide, Reader's Digest version of what happened, but there's essentially 320 billion of the 380 billion is used for the triple P. We're not sure when that's going live, whether it's today or tomorrow, or when you can actually get that money. But good thing for you is you can start applying today. You don't have to wait until the money's available. You can apply, get your name in the queue, just like the EIDL. 60 billion of the 320 billion is going to be set aside for minority businesses, underserved businesses, minority nonprofit, CDFIs, other micro lenders to get the money out to this kind of smaller businesses, the micro businesses. 50 billion is used for EIDL reserves. That's something that the government is putting aside in case some of these EIDL loans don't get paid back. This is something that wasn't talked about, but there is a set aside of 400 billion. This is in addition to the 380 billion. That is just for the EIDL loan. So the EIDL loan is Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. That money is available, but it's in a separate pot than where the triple P is coming from. But I do want to let you know that the feds are talking about relaunching the EIDL program web portal, and there's going to be 400 billion in there. There's another 10 billion that's set aside for the EIDL advance, and this was the monies that you receive that you can forgive, that you do not have to pay back. We don't have to, I don't have to go over that. A lot of this is a lot of stuff, but we work with business owners, again, at no cost. These are the forms that you may or may not need to fill out once you apply for the EIDL. It does depend on your current situation and your specific situation, but these are the forms, and we have access to these. We can help you fill them out, and we can help you walk through that. And I can share this deck with Kevin, and he can get it out to everybody. The forms that are needed for the triple P, there's the universal form. If you're not sure where to get it, or you're having trouble finding it, you can go to the Treasury's website, or you could go here and email us, and we can get it for you. There's breakdowns between sole proprietors and other entities. There's a lot of questions around how sole proprietors qualify, how 1099s qualify, how sole proprietors that have 1099s underneath them, underneath their 1099, how they all qualify, and it's very confusing. But we have the most updated information. We're not going to get through it with you in 10 minutes here. I know we're going to hopefully go to Q&A and you guys ask some questions, but here's the forms that you would need for a sole prop, all other entities. And if you're wondering how to calculate what you qualify for loan amount for a sole prop, it's right here. You go to your Schedule C, you take line 31, usually shows your net profit or loss. You divide it by 12 and multiply it by 2.5, and that's what you qualify for your loan amount as a sole prop. And then the forgiveness is what's forgivable within the triple P, which there's obviously a lot of questions on what's forgivable. There's a lot of questions that keep coming up to me. Hey, Scott, I got my money yesterday. What do I need to do with it? Well, you need to hire people back as soon as you can. You need to pay them for the next 8 weeks. And once you do that, it's more than likely going to be forgiven once you check with the bank and all this other great stuff. But they need to spend it. The 8 weeks start from the time that they get the money. Kevin mentioned this a little bit. So it's really hard to find triple P lenders if your bank that you bank with is either at capacity or they just don't like your type of business model or whatever it is. You can go to sba.gov/paycheck protection/find, and you could type in your zip code and you can find a bank near you. Or we very nicely made a little list here of some businesses, banks that we know. There's one that's not on here that I found out yesterday is taking on customers, and it's called Poppy Bank, Poppy. They're offering PPP loans for anybody in the state of California for a business. So they're a great lending institution as well. So in the state of California, these are some things that aren't being talked about. The reason why is the parameters we're launched like 2 to 3 weeks after the loan program was announced from the governor's office. But these are specific to the state of California. A business owner can possibly qualify up to $50,000 microloan fund. They can go to ibank.ca.gov to find out more info. If it's up to $1 million, if they want $1 million for a disaster, they need to. Those loans are guaranteed through the financial development corporations. It's their process. If you're Solano South, then you can email this gentleman, Chris Horton. If you're YOLO North, then you can email us at the SBDC, and we could assist you and get you signed up for that. The only way that you're eligible for either one of these loans is if you were disqualified for the EIDL or the triple P. Sorry, the EIDL and the triple P. And disqualification means, what it really means is if you weren't approved for it, and if you weren't approved, why weren't you approved? Is it one of these 4 questions right here? There hasn't been a full list delivered to anybody as to why you are declined or not declined, but these are the 4 that we've been able to find. So if you're a 501c6, you don't qualify for the EIDL or the triple P, but you qualify for the state disaster. And if you want to do that, we can help you with that. And then if you're going to get a loan from anybody else, whether it be a disaster loan, a PPP loan, or maybe a new loan that's going to be created overnight that we're not going to really know about because the feds are going to magically, throw another loan at us on Monday. These are the financials that you should be getting together. If your tax accountant, your CPA, or bookkeeper are extremely busy and they can't get this to you, well then we can be that person for you at no cost. We can help you understand your financials. We can get access to your QuickBooks, or you can create your P&L and send it to us, or whatever you want to do. We can help you put all these numbers together to make sense so that you're better prepared and ready to present to a lender. And then this is our way that you can get a hold of us. Obviously, you can get a hold of Kevin. If you are outside Kevin's area, we cover all Northern California. As I mentioned, Kevin is one of our advisors at one of our centers. But this is how you can get a hold of us. You can talk to a live person from this number. You can go to our website. It streams we have a YouTube channel now. I guess it streams all of our Monday, Wednesday, Friday calls that we do from 10:30 to 11:30. And then we have Espanol at Ask SBDC as well. And then this is the SBA disaster contact info. That's really important to know. So I'm done with what I wanted to talk about, so I appreciate the time. Not sure if you wanted Louise Dawson to talk a little bit about what she's doing with SBDC, or if you wanted to go to Bianca.
Yeah, why don't we dovetail that now? Because I do think that that's a good lead in, because I think that her programs, especially for the restaurants, are a natural progression, and then we'll move over to Bianca. Go ahead, Louise.
Great,
Thanks
thank
for joining
you.
us.
Well, yes, thank you for inviting me. Great presentation, Scott, as always. Thank you for keeping us so up to date on all of the last minute changes that are going on day by day. So yeah, my program is great. We have 10 advisors now with different areas of specialty, including finance, a little bit of finance that we share kind of with Scott, branding, marketing, mobile food, selling to Amazon. We have business plan experts, startup, operational. And what we do is we provide one-on-one advising, and also we develop webinars for the region at large and for individual SBDC centers, and whatever their requirements might be, to help the restaurant and food businesses in general. We work with a lot of artisan foods, which have a tendency to, they're kind of growing now, more so, even before COVID hit, our industry was changing very drastically. What with increased rents around the Bay Area and struggling with workforce, a lot of restaurants were moving over onto delivery platforms. We all saw that with the third-party deliveries. We just had a webinar last Monday. It's a series of 3, and I encourage anybody who has a restaurant or know of somebody that does to join. We have another one coming up on Monday, the 27th. It's part of the Pivot Your Restaurant series. We're talking about cloud kitchens, and some of them are referred to as ghost kitchens, but that kind of has negative connotations. So you can kind of learn about what that is and how, coming back is going to be very, very different, because if you've had a catering business, there's not going to be catering anymore. There's not going to be dropping off food in platters and having people self-serve. That's gone. That's going to be gone until there's any kind of a vaccine. What our caterers are doing, the ones that are open and operating right now, and there's some great opportunities for that right now, is just making sure that you're focusing on your packaging and going to individual meals or family meals. And then again, I think things that need to be addressed are, sanitation. We're working on developing a webinar right now that also involves a little team building, how to stay connected with your team during this whole process. A lot of restaurant employees that I've talked to haven't heard from their restaurant owners. They just haven't. And I think it's because the restaurant owners are scared because they can't answer the inevitable hard questions that are going to come their way, such as, are we going to be open? How are we going to stay safe? And I think that leadership role is going to be really important over the next couple of months. I think you have to stay connected. You have to feel okay to say, I don't have the answers for you right now, but what I can give you is transparency and honesty. And, if we are going to come back all together, involve your teams in that sanitation and that environment, and how to develop out a plan to do that. You don't have to provide all of the answers for that. So we also have another webinar coming up on May 4th as part of the Pivot Your Restaurant series, and that's the virtual tasting room. We have the honor of being able to work with a lot of the wineries in Napa and Sonoma, and a lot of them are doing really, really well right now. And what they're doing is the virtual tasting room. So you buy the wine up front, it gets delivered, and then you join in on the virtual tasting, and you'll be meeting the vintners and the winery owners, and it's getting to be a pretty big thing. One of our advisor, Germain Michel, actually has a wine bar called Amelie in San Francisco, and he has 2 Amelie's in New York, but he's also a winemaker in France and Argentina, and he is doing these weekly virtual tastings, and they're very successful. People are tuning in from all over the world. On his last one, there were probably like 150 people from Argentina, that were tuning in, and a lot from France. And so, there's all these people buying all of this wine that otherwise they wouldn't be buying. You're having them actually buy the wine prior to the tasting rather than trying to sell it through the tasting. So there is another opportunity there. So stay connected with us. We're happy to offer you, all of the trainings and webinars that we have available and that are coming online. So that we can sort of dovetail on the great work that you're doing there in Cupertino and with Kevin. So thanks.
Thank you. That's great input. Yeah, I think that all business owners have to have some kind of operational reflection on the changes that we now know are going to be our future. And I think that the hope of a lot of webinars like this is to try to help start that conversation and start that dialogue. Without any further ado, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Bianca Blomquist, who's going to share some additional information from the small business majority and some of the information that she's been able to gather to help businesses like yours as well. Go ahead, Bianca.
Hey there, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. So since Scott already gave us a pretty general overview of the legislation that was passed by the Senate the other day, I won't spend too much time, but I'd first like to introduce my organization, Small Business Majority. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization that advocates for small business owners. We identify small business owners as typically those with less than 100 employees, but the majority of our small businesses that we work with have about 4 or 5 employees, so what would be considered a micro business. We do most of our work through our education, just like this, webinars, presentations, etc. And we back all of our work up by third-party independent polling and research. We actually released a poll just earlier this week that showed that over 90% of small business owners were very negatively impacted by the coronavirus nationwide. And in California, 4 in 10 small businesses have laid off a substantial number of their workers. So today I really wanted to focus, considering that the focus was on restaurant businesses, I wanted to focus on what's next for the CARES Act, CARES 2. As Scott already went over, $310 billion are for the Paycheck Protection Program, the EIDL fund, etc. But we still need your help at Small Business Majority. We are still working with members to get cash assistance, direct cash into the hands of small business owners to avoid a lot of the bottlenecks and roadblocks that small businesses are experiencing, particularly.
Hey, Bianca,
yeah.
Could you put your presentation in slide mode? It's actually reduced, and so it really can't be seen. It's really small on the screen.
Oh no. Okay, yeah. Hold on one second. Let me see here.
There you go. Perfect.
That better? Okay.
Yeah,
sorry about that.
Nope, that's fine.
All right, cool. Well, good thing Scott already covered this, so I don't need to spend too much time on it. But anyway, we're still working on a bailout for small business owners in California. Again, the SBDC, Small Business Development Center, are the experts that you're going to want to go to. Something that I just want to remind folks of is that the SBA has a loan relief program. This is separate from the EIDL. Essentially, the SBA will automatically pay the principal, interest, and fees of current 7A loans and new 7A loans through September of this year. There's an employee retention credit that's available. We're happy to help small business owners understand this. So is the SBDC. This isn't as popular, however, because it includes, it's frankly geared towards larger workers or larger business owners, but you have questions on it, feel free to reach out to me. I've had quite a few small business owners that have questions about the tax credits that were available. Similarly, the tax credits that were made available through the FFCRA, which was the second rendition of the stimulus package in regards to payroll taxes. We're happy to help walk small business owners through some of that context. This is a smaller program, the Express Bridge Loan Pilot Program. Essentially, if you're a small business owner that already has a relationship with an SBA Express lender, you could be able to access up to $25K. And I put together a little bit of information for a lot of the restaurant business owners that are considering alternatives to layoffs. So it's important that you consider when you're looking at some of your options with your workforce as a restaurant, the Fair Labor Standards Act. The majority of restaurant employees are going to be non-exempt hourly employees. That's important when you consider how you're going to possibly reduce the hours and the wages of your workforce instead of entirely laying them off. Exempt employees are typically salaried employees. It is possible to have both in different divisions. But if you're considering reductions in pays and hours, it's important to consider California state law. California's labor laws are pretty complex, and they are highly in the workers' favor. There are certain things you need to consider when it comes to the wage and hour laws as interpreted by the state of California. Again, small business development centers can oftentimes help walk you through some of the nuances here. Your local SCORE is also equipped to help you kind of understand some of these nuances. In addition, if you're in Cupertino, there are a number of nonprofit organizations that are helping connect small business owners with employment law attorneys for free. There's UC Berkeley or UC Santa Clara. They have a legal clinic for free for small business owners. Another nonprofit called Start Small, Think Big does a lot of great work in the area. The BASE Task Force, in conjunction with UC Berkeley, is also providing some of these free options for small business owners that are thinking about reducing the wage and hours of their workforce. Temporary furloughs and shutdowns. If you're considering a furlough or a shutdown, you need to ensure that the reductions and the decisions that are made are indefinite and on a long-term basis, as opposed to definite and on a short-term basis. So instead of day by day, you're going to want to go more 3 month, 6 month period. I'm not going to spend too much time going into this. I will make this entire slide deck available to folks after the webinar. So feel free to take a look and click on some of the links that we've put up here. In addition, the work-share program through the Economic Development Department has been an option for some folks. It's kind of paper heavy, at least it was for some time. So it's been something that I've been somewhat reluctant to put too much emphasis behind, just because as far as I'm aware, and Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, it is still fairly paper heavy, but the governor did announce that he was going to be putting more funding into the EDD to include the work-share program and to make it more expedited for folks. But essentially the work-share program is a good option for you if you're kind of operating in a gray space of not necessarily, no work, but about, here's the graph, at between that 10 and 60% operational level. So for those folks that are in the in-between, the work-share program might be an option for you. You can find out more about this through the Economic Development Department online. A couple of changes have been made. And the most important thing to take into consideration between the work-share program and typical unemployment insurance that folks are already probably aware of is that it operates separate from unemployment insurance. And typically with UI, unemployment insurance, that is handled between the claimant, so the employee, and the EDD. But with the work-share program, because it's a program applied to by the employer is going to have a lot more of a role in it. In fact, all of the role. I'm not sure how many of the folks on this webinar have been hearing a lot about PUA, or the Pandemic Unemployment Assurance Program. I'm happy to go into it a little bit, since I know that that's something that Scott has expressed before, and one of his, a couple of his amazing, 3 times a week, your webinar that you do Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I do see some folks asking questions about the unemployment insurance and how it works, but essentially the pandemic additional compensation is what governs the $600 a week from the federal government. So that's basic through the feds. The pandemic unemployment assurance is also through the feds, but it basically allows states, essentially like their EDD, their labor department, or whoever operates their unemployment mechanisms. It allows states to open up those agencies to offer unemployment insurance for folks that typically would not be eligible for unemployment insurance. So I know that in the South Bay particularly, not a lot of restaurant workers, but a lot of folks in the South Bay are self-employed individuals, perhaps they're sole proprietors, independent contractors, etc. Theoretically, a lot of these folks will now be able to receive unemployment insurance by way of the Pandemic Unemployment Assurance Program. Again, if you have any questions about how much you might be able to receive and for how long, you can reach out to me and I will send over this slide deck afterwards. Also, Governor Newsom has announced a new website, which is pretty cool, onwardca.org. It's essentially a platform that connects COVID-19 displaced workers with almost 100,000 job opportunities in critical industries. Oh, and for folks that are kind of grappling with the unemployment insurance programs and trying to keep, checking the website for PUA, how that's going to work, they're still figuring a lot of it out. Key takeaway, I guess, is that it will be available on April 28th. That's what we have been told. That's as far as we understand it. But we're basically waiting for these pretty large government agencies to be ready to facilitate a massive expansion in unemployment insurance. So seems like everybody and their mom has a resource portal. So do we. Our resource portal is a little bit different, though. We have a lot of on-demand webinars that are still relevant and up to date. So for example, as I already mentioned, EDD is up to their ears in handling direct services to their clients and offering those benefits. So we do have some on-demand webinars with EDD themselves. They are the experts on EDD programs. Obviously, that's available there, as well as webinars with our wonderful resource partners. Scott had laid out some of the lending institutions that are providing non-customers with access to file their paycheck protection programs. Applications. We are also managing a list that is essentially that on venturize.org, which I encourage folks to hop onto. You can type in your zip code and find a paycheck protection program filer near you through your zip code. And again, we're interested in hearing from you as a small business owner, particularly business owners that are experiencing hardship due to COVID-19, but also outside of COVID-19, we advocate for small business owners on healthcare affordability issues, wealth building, taxes, tariffs, etc. So we're really interested in hearing about how COVID-19 is impacting your business, but also your business story as a whole. It's really the only way we can get things done in Sacramento and in Washington, D.C. for you. I think I'm running up on my time here. Online community forum. If you have a question that is probably, you think like this is something that other folks must be asking as well, go ahead and hop on our online community forum. I'm a nerd, so I like to think of it as kind of like, the Reddit small business thread. But it's a place for you to pose questions and get those questions answered by both myself, other outreach managers, experts, and other small business owners. All right, that's the rest of my slide. Again, I'm happy to share that with folks after the webinar.
Awesome. Thank you, Bianca. So where I'd like to start right now is I'd like to connect some of the dots, because where there gets to be confusion, because we mentioned a lot of different programs, and some of those programs play nice together and some of them don't. So the first part of the process is if the emergency disaster loan is available and the payroll protection program is available, can people apply for both? Scott, you want to take that?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I apologize. Yeah. Yes, you can apply for both. You can apply for the Triple P and the EIDL. We recommend that you apply for both. You just can't use the money for the same purposes if you do apply for both, or if you get approved for both. So Triple P comes out, Triple P you can use for payroll costs, all payroll costs, medical health benefits, workman's comp insurance. And then you can also use it for rent, utilities, and interest debt payments. But the EIDL, you can use it for everything. So we recommend that you use the Triple P only for payroll so that you have the best chance of it being 100% forgiven, and you use the EIDL for everything else. But if you don't get approved for the EIDL, then yes, you can use the Triple P for the rent, utilities, interest debt payments, and the Triple P. So You can apply for both. You just can't use the same money. You can't use the money for the same purpose.
And Bianca brought up one of the programs that I thought was very good, that work-share program. And I hadn't heard that it was paper intensive, so it's good to hear. But one of the things that I liked about it was that if you couldn't bring people back, so if they were a 30-hour employee and you weren't able to give them their full time, there was an ability for them to collect the difference through the EDD. So to be able to actually kind of be made whole through that program. But it doesn't play nice with PPP, does it?
I don't know. I wonder if Bianca knows that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So essentially, if I hear you correctly, you're talking about like how does PPP and unemployment insurance work together? If you were to
right, because the part of the PPP was that it's for payroll, and if you're reducing your payroll to a certain point, then the grant option on the PPP won't work.
Yeah. Well, so the reason for that is for folks, that's helpful for folks to understand, is to prevent what's called double dipping. And to prevent double dipping, it is, as far as we know it, and it's still being worked out, you are, it seems, able to access these benefits sequentially. So like, let's say I am a self-employed individual and I have applied for the PPP, but like so many, I have not yet received any of those funds. Can I collect unemployment insurance until I get that PPP money? And then the PPP, as we know, only goes for 8 weeks after the loan is signed. Can I then collect unemployment afterwards? According to the guidance, it looks like that would be possible. Again, a lot of that is still being worked out, but theoretically that would be the case.
Good. And Scott, you brought up a good point in regards to people that were in the loans, because a lot of people were confused. Since it closed last week, I can't tell you how many calls where people said, well, it's closed now, so I'm not going to get my money. Do you want to kind of speak to that?
Yeah, so if you're talking about the triple P or the idle?
Both.
Both, okay,
If they got in the door, but then the door closed, a lot of them are afraid that, okay, what do I do now?
Yeah. So if you apply for the idle March 29th or past March 29th, and you received a loan number with a 36, then you're in the queue. You're good to go. Everything's going to be, they're going to process your paperwork just like if you applied tomorrow or today. So that's good to know. If you applied before March 29th and you haven't heard anything, whether it went through your regular email or your spam email, then you need to reapply when it goes live again, because your application hasn't been processed, so they're not going to get to it, unfortunately, because it's in a separate old web portal. But for the triple P, if you applied at a bank and you received a loan number, they have to go to SBA and get it what's called an ETRAN, ETRAN loan number. If they have the loan number for you for your business, then you're good. You're one of the first allocations of the $349 billion. If they don't have a loan number associated with you, then you're not good. You need to reapply when it goes live. You need to, unfortunately, a lot of these big banks have really large queues of 100,000 or more. So if you're in a large queue of 100,000 or more, I recommend that you withdraw your application and go apply at a smaller bank that only has about 500 or more in their queue. And we have access to those lenders, because you're not going to make it all the way through.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I heard, and you guys have a lot more experience with it, but it seems like some of the larger banks have been the hardest pressed to get back to their customers. And I think a large part of it is because there are so many people in the queue, right? I mean, I don't think that anybody has ever processed this many applications at one point in time.
No, never.
And I would agree to an extent too. I mean, if you think about it, a lot of the larger banks are just less equipped to pivot or, change operations suddenly. But it's been kind of interesting seeing the resurgence of community banks, and I'd be curious to see how all of this kind of pans out for the role of community banks, because as we know, I mean, the role of community banks has changed so much since the recession. So it's kind of an interesting thing to watch.
No, I would agree with that. We've seen a lot of business owners frustrated with their relationships because, yeah, they've gone to larger banks because of some of the issues that have been in the past. But through this crisis, it seems like there are other people that are being much more friendly to their customers and more helpful through this difficult process. I think that's a very good point. So right now, when everything's being passed, we don't have any idea on whenever the new money that's been allocated is going to be reopened. And Scott, you mentioned, is it going to be a different portal? Is that what you had said?
So I'm assuming it's going to be the same portal, the same web portal that it was previously before it shut down. Unfortunately, we're not getting a word from SBA of what it is going to be and what it's not going to be, and the reason why is our local offices that we talk to every day, whether it be in Sacramento or San Francisco. They don't have the answers. DC has the answers. DC SBA has the answers. That means they're going to decide, they're going to send a little telecommunication to the disaster people, and the disaster people are eventually going to be able to get it to us. Luckily for us, Small Business Majority has direct access to DC better than we do. So sometimes we get the information faster from Small Business Majority before SBA gets it. I'm assuming it's going to be the same web portal. I know it's a long-winded answer. The reason why is we don't know, but I'm assuming that it will be that same portal.
Good. There was an interesting, I'd like to get to a couple of the questions that were here. One of them is really interesting. I'd like to jump to it. They basically said that they applied for the PPP loans and received the funds. With the initial calculations, they received the amount, but now with new calculations, they are 9,000. They're in 9K. I think they're saying excess. In other words, their new calculations is higher. What can they do? Are you familiar with that?
If the amount, it needs to be higher now or is lower?
If they have more money, it sounds like they received more money than they were calculating that they should qualify for. So they're worried about being given too much money. Is there something they could do?
So, it's a very interesting conundrum. If you were given too much, you could just give it back because you're paying down the loan. If you do have too much and it's more than what you would normally spend in 2 months worth of payroll and you're not sure if it's going to be 100% forgiven, then you could just give it back. Actually, there's not the forgivability part is where you don't have to pay it back. But if you receive too much, then I would just recommend to give it back. There's no prepayment penalty per se. So it's not a big deal if you get more.
Another one, and I've seen this before, is if the company is located here, but the parent company is overseas, the application form in the website has no space for the applicant to fill in the overseas parent company. So how do they kind of solve that, or can they? I mean, do you have any experience with that?
So the company's here, but the parent company that owns the company is overseas?
Correct.
Yeah, that's tricky. I don't know if Bianca can answer that, but I don't know. I'm going to have to table that. I forget. That's come up before, but only once out of 10,000 transactions that we're dealing with. So it's a great question. I might have to table that parking lot with you, Kevin, and come back later.
No, that's great. And yeah, with the way that everything's evolved, even sometimes when you have the answer, it's changed over the last week. So it's always good to refresh. Bianca, did you have any thoughts on that?
No, I think Scott's right that that's a little out of the norm.
Yeah. Another question is that they applied for the EIDL on 4/6 and received a confirmation number. Do they need to reapply?
No, for the EIDL, if you applied on 4/6, you're fine. You received the number. Unfortunately, you just need to be patient and wait for them to reply to you. They're going to eventually assign a case manager to you. And then once they assign a case manager to you, then you can start filling in other paperwork and then they'll process your loan.
Good. Now, one of the things, so we don't have any idea whenever the new program is going to come online. And is there any talk of additional money for the PPP? Because one of the, when we talk about the different loan types, whenever there was the EIDL and the PPP, there wasn't any bandwidth for some of the regular California programs, Scott, that you're familiar with. Now some of those have come back online. Is there any interaction issues with the fact that now we've got some more federal money coming on board?
No, there's no issues really. It's the only issue, Kevin, is the inevitableness or whatever, that the money's going to run out in probably 3 days, 3, 4, 5 days from the time that they actually open it again and launch it. We went before we knew anything or how to do anything. We went through 349 billion in 2 weeks. Okay, and then now that we know what we're doing, and the banks have got better with their processes, whether it's a tech platform or a human platform, they're going to be able to process these much faster than before. And the other 320 billion that's coming out, whether what Bianca was showing on her slide, 30 billion goes here, 30 billion goes here for the small banks, big banks. Then you take 320 minus, whatever it takes, 320 minus 60. So that's 260. That 260 billion that's going to go to the everyday people that we work with, that's going to go very, very fast. And then the next issue, Kevin, is that we're going to have to come out with the triple P cubed, I guess. We got to come out with these new loans because there's going to be need to be more money. What might happen is the EIDL loan might become the best loan product on the market again. So when originally everything happened, when the world ended, EIDL launched. That was from the feds. The money comes from the feds, no banks. That crashed several times, as we all know, because of the inundatedness that they received. They received as many transactions in a day as they normally do a year, which is insane to fathom, right? So the EIDL was the best loan product. Then the triple P came out. And then the triple P was the best product because you can get money on the streets a lot faster than from the feds. And then now the second triple P is coming out, but it's going to be gone. And now the EIDL, they're talking about pumping 400 billion into the EIDL. So it's very tricky to answer that question. Right now, it's all about the triple P. When we do webinars, we put triple P on the front end, and we barely talk about EIDL. But what I'm thinking is going to happen is next week, come Monday, we're going to flip it again, regardless of when it goes live, because it isn't easier. What's easier about it is that there's not as many questions on if it's forgivable or not forgivable because the loan is not forgivable. Everybody likes a triple P because it's potentially forgivable for the first, if it's a 2.5 month, that's 75 days, but the first 60 days are forgivable if you spend it right. That's why people love the triple P. But I really honestly believe, even though it's not forgivable, the EIDL is the best loan to get because it's the easiest to spend the money on and there's not as many restrictions. But there's obviously, a lot of different views and, influences on this. But
interesting. Now, when you talk about iBank, because Bianca referenced it and I've seen it in your stuff as well. How do they fit in with all this process? I mean, a lot of people are that's where they get confused is then they hear that there's this iBank that has 25,000. How are they different and who are they for? Yeah.
So we should just start calling them the invisible banks. That's
why is that?
Yeah, because you can't find them and you don't know where they are. So that's what I like to call them. But nobody knows what the I means. I mean, it means infrastructure, but again, nobody knows what that means. So let's call it the invisible bank. It's very confusing. They exist on a state level. The triple P is on a local, regional level for the banks, and the EIDL is a national, federal level. So the iBank is for the state of California. Other states have their own similar invisible bank. But in California, what they rolled out was you can, if you are not qualified for the triple P or the EIDL, you get to, so a lot of restaurants or a lot of individuals that own businesses that don't have social security numbers, they have matricula IDs or consular IDs, they qualify for the iBank loan program because they are not qualified for the EIDL and triple P. So they don't even need to apply for the EIDL or triple P. They could just apply for this iBank loan, which is not a loan from iBank. iBank is the state guarantee side. Think of SBA as federal guarantee. iBank in California is state guarantee. So you have the state and the feds. The guarantee is just an insurance risk to the lender in case the business is not able to pay back the loan. The state, iBank, will pay back the lender if there's a loss, and then the borrower, the business owner, will owe iBank that money instead of the bank. On the federal side, same thing. If SBA guarantees a loan and a business owner fails, SBA will pay the bank. They get their insurance risk paid for. They're done. But then you have a federal lien on your personal taxes, or your personal business credit. So it's an insurance risk that is guaranteed. The triple Ps are 100% guaranteed. The iBank loans are 95% guaranteed. And the iBank loans are very similar to the triple P loans. They're actually money coming from lenders, not from iBank or not from SBA. They're actually money come from lenders, and the monies are just guaranteed.
And if I could just add, just like Scott said, it is similar. It's helpful to think about it that way. The PPP, being guaranteed in that way, but that also means that it still suffers from the same structural issues, just on a statewide basis. So what we're finding with the iBank, and by the way, it's $50 million that Governor Newsom had announced to be put into the iBank, which is exciting, but unfortunately, as far as I know, as of this morning, the only folks participating in that program are in Southern California. Isn't that right, Scott? Like, there's at the very least, I can tell you that there aren't enough lenders. And so if the funds are there, just like it was with the Paycheck Protection Program, but folks don't have access to actually getting those funds, how helpful is it? So I think it's a structural issue that will need to be addressed.
Yeah, it's just like when the triple P launched, the lenders didn't really know what to do because the feds wrote the SOPs, the standard operating procedures. This is similar. This state guarantee, the governor's office, iBank, economic development department, they had a great vision and goal to roll this money out. But to backfill it is where it's tricky. Even though it's a very interesting political game between what the lenders want to fund and what they feel they'll be covered or not covered on. And the reason for that is, however long ago, I'm not sure, and this is not a knock on SBA, but this is truth. I think it was about 10 years ago, SBA banks were calling notes for SBA to pay them, and SBA did not, whether they ran out of money or whatever, but they did not backfill or actually pay the guarantees. So a lot of lenders don't like SBA because of that, because it's not guaranteed that they will back your loan if something happens with the business. So there's some banks that love SBA and they do SBA all day long. Then there's some banks that love iBank and they do iBank all day long. There's very few banks that do both. There's more now because SBA added about 700 national lenders to this triple P program, because the triple P is under the 7A program in SBA. So the banks that weren't offering SBA 7A loans, they signed up overnight and now they can offer triple P loans. So there is a lot more into SBA. What Bianca's talking about is there's 4,700 banks nationally that are doing the triple P. The state guaranteed loan program in the state of California, there's only like 2 that have said, yeah, we will do these loans. And it's not 100% guarantee, it's 95% guarantee, which is pretty dang good, but we still can't, for whatever weird reason, small business majority, SBDC, we can't get an answer from any lenders that want to do this state disaster loan. And then iBank did make it more trickier last Friday when they came out and said the only way a business can qualify for the state guarantee loans is if they are disqualified from the triple P and the EIDL. So not everybody can apply. So if you apply for EIDL and you're just waiting, you apply for triple P and you're waiting, you can't apply for iBank until you found out that you're disqualified, which I think is,
Just to add, and I know this wasn't like in the announcement, but I feel comfortable saying it. I think it would be safe to also say though that the iBank is intended also for folks that would be disqualified from some of the federal money. So like if you're undocumented, for example, I think that is something that the iBank is hoping to address.
Yes, just very true. But they're just not coming out and saying it that clearly. I agree with you. I've heard that same thing from iBank, but they're not making that announcement. The other thing is, you said undocumented. Oh, I forgot what I was going to say.
There are other reasons. So it's if they were turned down or didn't qualify for the other loans, and you identified a few things, right?
Yeah, because there is only a few things. SBA won't give us all the reasons why they're declined for EIDL. One is credit, but they won't tell us a credit score minimum. One is undocumented individual, and the other one is a 501c6, like chambers and stuff. And then that's pretty much everything, like for the most part that we found out.
Now, if they had another disaster loan, they could still qualify for EIDL?
Yes, they can. They just can't use the money for the same things. But that's on a good faith, of course. They're not going to jump into the bank account and see if they spent the money on what they said that they did or did not.
Right. Okay.
So it's good faith. So the I forgot again.
So now there are other local programs, and are you guys, are any of you familiar? Because I'm hearing that there's like some GoFundMe stuff, and then there's some cities like Santa Clara that are doing some grant programs. How familiar? I think that's where it gets to be confusing for a lot of people as well, because it seems like money's coming from everywhere, and it's hard for individuals to figure out what's going to be appropriate, how many of them can they apply for, how often should they apply for them, and then what they can expect to receive and how long it's going to take to get it, right? I mean, it just seems like that's where I'm hearing a lot of the confusion. Are you guys hearing the same thing? And do you have some wisdom around that?
I mean, that's one of the reasons why I've been talking about our access to capital portal, Venturize. We're trying to keep that as like a place for folks to go if they are interested in some of these more localized efforts. I don't know if Louise has anything to add, but I do know that there have been some relief efforts that are geared towards restaurant workers, specifically, I would imagine. And, and the thing about the local is it is difficult to keep track of all the, the ins and outs, the eligibility criterion, but then also when oftentimes they're not live when folks find out about them. So, I mean, it's just, I would ask folks to try venturize.org. We're only putting those kinds of grant programs that are actually live or about to be live, so folks can prepare. Because if you do a Google search, you'll see so many, but sometimes you can't tell if it's for cash or if it's for advertisements or what.
Yeah, and you've heard some of the. Go ahead, Louise.
Yeah, I was going to say we have a client that came on our webinar on Monday, and she, her goal was to keep all of her employees 100% employed throughout the pandemic. And so what she did is she went to her customers and actually raised $150,000. And what she was able to do is partner with nonprofits that provide food to frontline workers, World Central Kitchen, for the homeless and for senior citizens. And she is providing 17,000 meals through May 15th. So she kind of went, she did it grassroots. She went to the people that love her and wanted to support her, was able to raise money. And then during the day, she turned her restaurant, instead of a restaurant with just third-party delivery, she turned it into a community kitchen and is able to she's kept 100% of her staff 100% employed. They had to switch up a little bit, some of the functions that they were doing, but they did stay employed, and now they're there. She charges $8 per meal, which is basically cover the cost of her cost of goods and her payroll. And she's providing about 500 to 750 meals per day to her community. And so it's another way of like really thinking outside of the box, because people, she had a pretty extensive catering business before this, but what she had to focus on is doing, again, the individual meals and her packaging, but she was able to pivot pretty quickly in order to make that happen. And it just sort of, the more she got into it, the more it grew on her. And so it's just another perspective rather than going to, these traditional lenders, or while we're in this holding pattern, to kind of think about, is this something that, you could maybe consider for your business?
One of the things that, I've heard from restaurant owners, especially in regards to the PPP, because part of it is that requirement that you have a certain threshold of your previous employees that you're going to retain for a period in time. And the big concern around restaurant owners is the fact that if they have to remove half of their tables or a third of their table, whatever that requirement's going to be for the social distancing, that's going to hurt revenue. And if they aren't able to ramp up for a delivery, or, and if people aren't coming in, how do they reemploy all of their staff? That they feel like that's virtually impossible. Have you heard any discussion around any of this? Because that's one of the things I'm trying to engage with restaurant owners to try to figure out what they do. Because it just seems like the forgiveness part of the PPP just is probably not going to apply to them. But I don't know what your experience is.
Well, I'm with Scott on that one. I really don't know that. And again, we're encouraging everybody to apply for everything because we just don't know how long this is going to last. But, the hook is, it's forgivable. And so everybody wants to sign up for it. But it puts it doesn't really work for restaurants. It puts you in this difficult position where, okay, you're bringing all your staff back, you're taking them off of unemployment, they're sitting at home and you're having to pay them, for 2 months. And then what happens after that? What if I open my doors and my restaurant is still operating at 40%? I've got to let them go. So is that really going to be forgivable? And so it's a difficult kind of decision to make. And I realize that. And, the one thing I always say is that restaurateurs, we're gamblers to start with, and so, if you're, and every situation is different for every restaurateur. The thing that's becoming very apparent is that, if you plan on reopening, you're gonna have to do a robust to-go business. If you haven't done that, then you're gonna have to work towards that, because that's gonna be the norm. And I think that you have to really focus on, something that was really great about the webinar that was on Monday was that, Adriana and her restaurant's Pika Pika. And she said, look, I have a product here. It's not really my choice to decide how people are going to access my product. I have to make my product available through every platform, every venue, every opportunity that I absolutely can. And that's what I have to focus on right now. I can't just say anymore, I'm going to be a sit-down restaurant, or, I'm just going to be a community kitchen. I have to be everything. And that's what restaurants have to kind of get their head around at this point in time is, what are all the avenues? Say yes to everything, make your product available to as many people as possible. How do I cast a larger net so that more people are buying my product? Because, again, I mean, the price points are going to be coming down. And so, again, you're going to have to do a volume business anyway. So it's a tricky situation. I get it. I think, again, going back to the original question, I think that ultimately the idle loan is going to be the better solution for restaurants, because it's giving them 6 months or up to 6 months of total expenses, which includes their payroll. Yes, it is a loan, but it's over 30 years at 3.75%, and there's nothing due for the first 12 months. And so I think that's really the better solution for restaurants rather than the PPP. That's just my personal opinion. But, when restaurants come to me with that quandary, that's, you know, that's my response to them, is to maybe focus on idle, you know.
I also just add, you know, anecdotally speaking from the work that we've done with small business owners, is they're also seeming to get their funds more quickly through the idle program. And whether it's because it's simply easier for folks to understand, they can submit it online in one place. I mean, even I know the web address by heart at this point. It remains to be seen, but I think there's something there, and I think that's really interesting. The story that you told, Louise, about your friend in the area that started that community kitchen, those are such heartwarming stories, and I think that they're really important to tell at this time. And I also think, folks, you need to remember that the Paycheck Protection Funds and the EIDL funds are coming from the federal government by way of taxpayer dollars. There is nothing that says that we should not expect more when it comes to getting these funds to these individuals. We can't rely only on the good graces of amazing folks like her to, you know, be that pillar in her community. Frankly, that is the role of the federal government at times like these.
Mm-hmm. And that's a great point. And it, you know, again, there are, without wanting to scare anybody, you know, there are implications with our food chain right now. A lot of the farmers are, you know, destroying a lot of their crops because the restaurants purchased, you know, are used to purchasing so much and now they're not. And so, you know, on the other side of that, there are so many individuals right now that need access to meals, and the meals are being provided. So the restaurant at this point in time really could step in, and if they focus on being a community kitchen where they're providing food to their community, you know, and raising money to do that, you know, or getting contracts with, you know, there are contracts out there right now. Adriana is just applying for a contract with the city of San Francisco to provide meals. And so there's funding for that. And so it's kind of twofold because, you know, you're keeping your employees employed, but you're also helping with the issues with the food chain and food distribution, and being able to funnel that instead of through your restaurant customers, through your restaurant to the community at large, which is, you know, been very impacted right now. So I think, as well as thinking, you know, how am I going to get loans, and thinking independently about how you're affected, some of the better solutions are coming when you're thinking about kind of an overreaching approach, which in this case with Adriana, you know, I just thought was fascinating. So.
Oh, all those are good points, and I appreciate your comment on the idle, because that seems to be what my thought was as well. Because of the provisions in the PPP and the forgiveness, it just seemed like a lot of restaurant owners were kind of shaking their heads about that one. One of the questions that we had, Scott, was if you could put up that slide for the banks that are taking applications from non-customers.
Yes, yeah, I'll put it up.
We'll include those in the show notes as well, and make sure that, yeah, both of the, you know, the PowerPoints that were made available, and then other links to all of these resources will be attached to this program on the Cupertino website following the broadcast today. One of the things I'd like to kind of address with the group is there's a lot of talk about reopening and when we reopen. Here we go. Let's go ahead and let that get put up. And if people want to take just a picture of the screen, you can. That will allow you to get started.
I also want to say, and I don't know, you know, I mean, I have found it helpful in my outreach to folks in the South Bay, but there are a couple of community banks that are willing to work with folks that are not non-customers, but willing to open up a checking account that's free on the first day. I mean, you know, it's a free country and do what you want, but it could be, you know, a good move for you as a small business owner if you don't have a relationship with a lender to maybe, you know, consider that moving forward.
No, that's a good point. So one of the things that I'm hoping we can discuss resources around is, as we're talking about potentially reopen, I think that, there's still a lot of uncertainty as to about when that is going to be. But just as Scott was saying, to kind of prepare for some of these loans whenever they do reopen, get that information together and being able to have your ducks in a row so that whenever you need to apply, you've got those other forms filled out. I think that businesses preparing for getting reopened and coming up with that plan, because we know that for their, Louise was talking about owners contacting their employees, and I think that's a great first step as well. How do you get in contact and let people know what your ideas and thoughts are and getting feedback? But more importantly, if we're talking about social distancing issues, your employees needing to wear masks, how you define the employee's workspace based on new social distancing or even mitigating those kind of circumstances. Do you guys have any resources or ideas? Because one of the things that I'm hoping that we can start the dialogue and start the conversation with not just restaurants, but all small business owners is, how do you, what are the things you need to start considering and reflecting upon to get yourself set up to reopen? Because the more prepared that people can do now, instead of worrying about when they're going to reopen, I think the more productive that conversation is. Well, what are your guys' thoughts?
I agree with that 100%. I think it does depend on, it is industry specific, I feel, or business model concept specific. What Louise is doing with her team and her clients is very different than what I'm going to do with my team as far as helping them, that are not restaurants, other types of industries. Louise is, they're actually working on tactics of how to continue to sell stuff even though you're not open, which is a crazy thing to think about. But her strategies for that is to sustain somewhat of some sales currently, and then when they do reopen, whatever that's going to look like. And I think same with what small business majority specializes in and who they advocate for. I think we'd have to take like the top 10 industries and figure out the best ways for them to either reopen or sustain, or partially sustain, partially reopen. I don't think it's as easy as an answer to just say that they should all go do e-commerce. But I think it's going to have to be segmented per industry.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think that one of the things that I thought about is that tying everything to a budget. I mean, and really understanding, because you're going to be dealing with fewer dollars, that you really need to, as far as your purchasing, your scheduling, you really need to be able to break the glass and put a system into place that where you have enough, because you don't want to run out for the customers that you do have, but that you're not over purchasing, so that you really can maintain or start to build some kind of margin coming out of it. It's systems like that I'm talking about, and trying to get resources, but I do think it is going to be different for other people. Bianca, did you have a thought?
No, just that's exactly why, Scott and Louise are here. They're there, and they're able to help small business owners, weather this and come out on top and hopefully stronger. Revisit your business plan. Like, you need to meet with an SBDC advisor. If you don't have a business advisor already, they're a great resource. And I mean, you've already paid for it, if presumably you're a taxpayer. I mean, they do great work, and that's what they're there for. So I can't express that enough.
Yeah, I think that for me, it's always been one of the best kept secrets, is that there are resources that are free for businesses that they could take advantage of, that could be very helpful. And that's one of the reasons why I'm very thankful that all of you have shown up today, because I think that each of you brings something to the table that people don't realize that is out there that could be super helpful to them. And I think that it really is going to take a lot of different resources from a lot of different areas for these business owners to piece together their plan that's going to allow them to be successful. But like I said, I did like Louise's idea about contacting your employees and staying in contact. I think that from a leadership perspective, that is one of the most outstanding things that I've heard, because I do think that there's a lot of employees that are sensing some uncertainty about what's going to be going forward, especially in the restaurant industry. And I think that your employees know your business, and they're going to be your biggest advocates and the best help to get you jump started and back and going again, and how you leverage that relationship to get this jump started. One of the thoughts that came out of Louise whenever she said that catering is going to go away, a lot of restaurateurs that I've been talking about are reluctant to go to a grab and go concept, and we've seen those start to accelerate, where if somebody wants your food and they can just walk in and grab it, not have to order, pick up, wait, but just come in and pick it up, and you can have some kind of a format to do a grab and go. I think that that's another addition as well, but it seems to once again have a lot of reluctance. So I think that one of the things that I'd like to take a moment and maybe even hear from Louise, because she's probably seen as many as I do, have owners that are kind of reluctant to embrace some of these different ideas. What kind of advice can we give them?
That's a great question. And we had that issue, one of the directors in Solano County, one of the SBDC directors, found that a lot of their clients were, a little bit reluctant to move their business models, to leverage the technology, and felt like they were not competent. And so what he did is he reached out to Otter, which is a new platform which basically allows you to manage all of your third-party deliveries on one platform. And they'll even go back and renegotiate some of your commission splits with these companies, sometimes from 30% down to 20%. As well as helping you to get on board. You'll only have to manage one tablet, and it gives you a lot of great analytical data that you can use to help you kind of forecast and figure out, what direction you need to be going. So what they did is they paired with a local bank to provide the startup fee, which was $150,000. Then Otter kicked in 3 free months. And then moving forward, the monthly fee would go from $50 down to $35 for those Solano SBDC clients that wanted to get on board. And then they had also promised quite a lot of advising and consulting and hand-holding to get the clients on board with the technology. So it's something that I would definitely recommend that cities look into for some of your more, technology, maybe shy clients, or those that are scared to take that step forward. I thought that was a great program. So
that is. Well, as we start to wrap up, I'd like to go back through to the different panelists and once again share any final thoughts about the path forward with the expertise and knowledge that you guys have. Louise, since you're front and center, why don't we go ahead and start with you as far as, once again, talking a little bit about your programs and then the assistance that you're helping to provide.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks again for inviting me. It's been great. And I guess my takeaway for right now is to, in your own restaurants, to really step into a leadership role. If you haven't reached out to your employees, start reaching out to them. Try to call them at least on a weekly basis. If you have the capacity to maybe have a Zoom meeting like this one, where you can see them and lay eyes on them. And now's the time to let them know it's okay that you don't have the answers right now. But what you can do is you can all be in this together. And if the opportunity comes up where you can reopen, you all together can start working on a plan so that everybody feels safe, included, and healthy. And I think that that's going to go a long way with you right now. So for me, that would be the first step.
Good. And yeah, and I would encourage people to, look at the ongoing webinars that you have. And once again, we'll have links in the show notes to all that. I do appreciate you being just an amazing resource and an additional resource, because I do think it is going to take all of us to do that. Bianca, your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, nothing profound. I have been heartened by the leadership of all the organizations that are on today: NorCal SBDC Network, the restaurant program, City of Cupertino, the chambers. It's been really cool to see everybody come together to really showcase the actual ecosystem that we always talk about in our networks. To the small business owners, and how we're all really working together to get small business owners through this. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And Scott, any words of wisdom about all this stuff that people are facing? Because I mean, you catch the lion's share of, especially when it comes to the funding issue, which is the biggest one. What's the hope you can give everybody that's listening?
So I would say that don't disqualify yourself from applying. Don't listen to the news that you may not qualify. Please don't hesitate to apply. I know we talked about the Triple P, what we like about it, what we don't like about it. We talked about the idle, what we like about it, what we don't like about it. It can't hurt for you to apply for both. And then when you get approved for both, then you can take that decision. You can talk to Louise if she's your advisor on the restaurant side. You could talk to me or Kevin or anybody else in Northern California SBDC region. And I do want to tell you this. So we are here for you at no cost, 100% your advisor. And we know that we have to be everything for you, because you may not have access to your tax accountant, your CPA, your bookkeeper, your therapist, your loan agent, everything. And that's what we're paid to do, is to help small business owners succeed, thrive, and survive this disaster. So please reach out. Thank you.
I appreciate that. And yeah, I just want to once again reiterate that I appreciate the City of Cupertino and the partnership that we have along with the Chamber of Commerce, that really there are groups that are the tip of the spear right now for these small business owners, that they are not alone, and that they're definitely going to need all of these resources working on their behalf. More importantly, though, we need to hear from the small business owners as well. For these programs to truly work for you, we need the feedback so that we're not guessing at what the right resources or what the right direction is to provide these things for you. So please feel free to reach out to the Chamber of Commerce, to the City of Cupertino, to the SBDC, and to these other partners that we have. And make sure that you are letting your voice be heard and what your needs are and what you feel that is going to be helpful for you to be successful, because it is going to take all of us working together to get this thing done. And I couldn't be more happy and thankful for all of you for taking your time, the panelists, in addition to all the people that are on the webinar. And I appreciate everybody's efforts in trying to overcome this just huge speed bump that we've now hit with our economy, and that we're going to try to overcome in the future. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar for today, but just want to say thank you again for everybody for attending. And we hope that this was helpful and that we can help more in the future. So thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.